Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Texas-based immigration attorney Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch. Kate, thank you so much for joining me.
Happy to be here.
We have a lot to discuss. I'm excited for you to break it down for us. So last month, Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed a bill into law that would let police arrest immigrants who cross the border illegally. There's an update to this, a new development. Just this week, the DOJ sued the state to block the move. So can you break down the arguments on both sides for us?
Sure. So Senate Bill 4 is a law in Texas that is set to take effect in early March, March 5th or 6th. And what it says is it creates misdemeanor crimes for entering the country illegally with a step up for a subsequent entry. And it authorizes law enforcement agents throughout the state of Texas to interrogate, arrest, detain, and charge people who have entered the country illegally. It also has a provision for failure to depart, so that if someone, says that they will leave the country instead of accepting a charge, that they could face up to 20 years in jail. So it's very severe and harsh penalties. And so the arguments against the law are that immigration is a federal issue and that police agents who are not immigration experts should not be enforcing immigration laws. Also, that there's no way to enforce a law like this without engaging in racial profiling, right? So how would a police officer in Dallas who has pulled someone over who is driving know or suspect that person has entered the country illegally without using some type of racial profiling? So there's lots of arguments against the law. I would say the arguments that there are for the law are for the people who feel like the federal authorities are not doing their jobs in terms of immigration and they want the state to step in and take control.
I'm just going to ask you point blank, is SB 4, this law, is it constitutional?
No. SB 4 is not constitutional because federal immigration enforcement is a federal issue, and that is the bottom line. There was a similar law in Arizona 10 years ago, and that was SB 1070, which went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Most of that law was blocked, although there was a provision that allowed some law enforcement agents to ask people about immigration status. And so my guess is that the way that this will play out in Texas with the lawsuits, the DOJ lawsuit or the ACLU lawsuit, is that portions of Senate Bill 4 are going to be enjoined, but probably some main piece of it may be allowed to continue.
The DOJ in their lawsuit said this, quote, Texas cannot run its own immigration system. How strong is that argument? Because from what you're saying, it sounds like the DOJ has a pretty rock solid case.
I believe that they do. It is very clear that immigration enforcement is under federal jurisdiction, and that a state should not be stepping in and creating a state crime for immigration issues or asking police officers to understand and know and enforce immigration laws. So I think that the DOJ has a very strong argument and strong chances to win their lawsuit. However, what we may see is that a federal court will allow certain provisions of the law to move forward and disallow other provisions, like the state crime or the failure to depart, but they may allow police authorities to inquire as to someone's legal status in the country. So we'll have to wait and see what the courts do, but probably we'll see an injunction in part, would be my guess.
I do want to zoom out and talk about the precedent that this sets. What about other states like Arizona, California? When there is a decision, what precedent does it set for those states as well as the other states throughout this country? Because as you've noted before, immigration is a political issue, hot button issue, almost a third rail issue in this country. And other governors, other states are saying every state's a border state. So what's the precedent throughout the country?
Yeah, I think this could have a significant impact, both for the state of Texas, for our economy. I'm an immigration lawyer and I talk to immigrants in Texas every day. They are terrified. Many of them are thinking about leaving. We're going to have economic impacts in the state of Texas. So that's one major issue. But the impact on other states, I think other states are going to be watching to see what happens with the lawsuits. And we're probably going to see other conservative states pass similar laws if it's not blocked by the federal court.
The law's supposed to go into effect in early March, as you noted. So, because they were sued, does this mean that this law is held up as of right now?
Right now, there is no change to the implementation date of the law. Probably before it is set to go into effect, we will have some type of decision on an injunction or basically an emergency stay. And that's, I think, where a judge will look at the whole law and say, maybe all of it is enjoined, maybe none of it is enjoined, or maybe parts of it are enjoined. And we'll just, have to stay tuned and probably hear something in February on that.
You, as you noted, you're in Texas right now. You're an immigration lawyer. So, what do you think's missing from the national conversation? Because you're in the thick of it every day.
I think that what we all need to recognize is that this nation has a need for immigrants. So whether you approach this from a humanitarian angle or a fiscal angle, the reality, the bottom line is that we have an aging population in the United States. It's only getting worse as the baby boomers age, and we're going to need people to care for them. We already have gaps in labor on all levels of the skill spectrum. So in agriculture and construction, in the semiconductor industry, we need workers. And what's great about the United States of America is we have people who want to come here and fill those jobs. It would be as easy as flipping a switch and allowing for an increased immigration system that could solve the problems of our economy. But instead of having that conversation, we have this conversation as if immigration is a bad word, because I think it's such a powerful political motivator for people, and that our so-called leaders use it to advance themselves in their campaigns rather than coming together and doing something like immigration reform or collaborative decision making that would improve the situation for everybody. And I think probably what's going to happen is the economy is going to suffer. It's going to get worse and worse until we get to a point where we just have to accept the fact that immigration is the solution. And I hope that we can do that sooner rather than later.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because DHS Secretary Mayorkas said that the migrants coming through the southern border is historic, the numbers coming through. I've talked to Republicans and Democrats. Both say there is a crisis at the southern border. Obviously, the solutions on how to fix that differ greatly by party. So what should we watch out for next when it comes from a law perspective?
I think at the southern border, it's important to note that for 20 years, we had an orderly system for processing asylum seekers. People could present at the border, they'd be screened under a credible fear interview, and if they qualified, they'd be allowed in, and if not, they'd be deported. That was a functioning system. We shut that down under COVID, under Title 42, and so for almost 4 years, we had zero asylum processing. Now we're back into a system where there's fits and starts, and sometimes we do and sometimes we don't, and you have to use the app, and it's chaotic and confusing. And so we have not entered back into the system where we have a mechanism for screening asylum seekers. And so the result, the impact of that, is chaos along the border. My argument, coming from my experience of doing asylum law in Texas for 15 years and watching this over many administrations, is that we need to just settle into an orderly routine where we allow people to come and seek asylum and we screen them quickly. But when we shut the border down and we have desperate migrants, many of whom do qualify for asylum, and they're subjected to danger and kidnapping in Mexico, they're going to keep trying to come in until we give them an opportunity to be screened. And that's the reality of the situation.
And when it comes to SB 4 specifically, as an immigration attorney, what's on your radar that you want to put on ours between now and March?
My message to immigrants in Texas about Senate Bill 4 is not to panic, to know your rights, to understand the law. It only applies to people who have entered the country illegally recently, right? To know things like that, to consult with an immigration lawyer and find out if there's a way you can get yourself in legal status so that you can be protected. My message to the rest of the state of Texas about Senate Bill 4 is that this is a law that harms everyone. It harms our economy. It burdens our law enforcement officers with having to know an immigration system that's very complicated. It hurts public safety because it's going to create a whole community that has fear of law enforcement now. And so it's just a bad idea. So just in terms of, thinking and talking about this law, it's bad for everyone. And I think as long as we can start having that conversation and stop just following this idea that immigration is a problem and it just must be stopped. That is not the reality. And so to the extent we're hearing those messages from people in elected office, we need to pause and think a little more deeply about what the truth of the situation is and what's best for everybody.
Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, I appreciate your expertise, and as this situation develops, I hope you come back on, join me, and break it down. Thank you so much.
Happy to be here. Thank you.